We're in the home stretch now.
Maybe.
Well, you're right. Maybe maybe we get Monte Cristo the second time.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And then we have to take revenge on our revenge partners. Oh, it's just revenge all the way down. The house was conspicuously empty. There was no police tape, no armed guards, not a soul. They parked the car some distance away and snuck in for a closer look. And yet someone had clearly been at the house. The chopper was smashed to bits and had been set on fire. Its remains were charred and the metal had warped into impossible shapes under the intense heat. This looks bad. Stay behind me. Josephine didn't. She rushed to the house with a gun in her hand, only to find it completely deserted. There were no signs of struggle. On the table there was half a glass of whiskey, clearly intended for Bob's nerves. Amy had left her plate on the couch.
It's like they just left to get something from the store.
Hey, I told you to stay behind me. This could have been a trap.
If they were trying to lure us in here for slaughter, then why burn the chopper and leave it there?
I don't know. I also don't know why they left the place unwatched.
Bob and Amy have been taken, though, that's for sure.
There's food in the kitchen. We should eat quickly and then get out. I'm 99% sure they've been alerted to us.
Yeah, sure. I'll just shower off first.
Are you sure right now is... Oh, of course. Take your time. Josephine slowly ascended the stairs. Ronnie went to the kitchen. Josephine was covered in the blood of the man she loved. Of course she had to shower. Sometimes Ronnie wished she would think before opening her mouth. Josephine let the warm raw water rush over her exhausted joints. She didn't put on the lights. A little darkness was soothing, and the water glittered anyway. She thought of Norbert, the talk they had on the balcony of Jenner, the months they had spent together. Norbert had literally brought her back from the dead, but Norbert had also given her faith in other people, even as she was basically imprisoned in Jenner where everything had a price tag. Without Norbert, she would have withered away at Jenner or been driven to take her own life. Never had she heard Norbert speak or seen him act in a way that didn't aim at helping the most people. For his kindness, the last person he tried to help had gunned him down. No, not the last. But the last breath Norbert had wanted to help her, even when he no longer knew who she was. Who would kill such a good person? As if to answer her question, the flow of water suddenly stopped. Josephine knew why. Francis had seen that the showers were on in the house. He could have attacked without warning. This was him taunting her. She would make sure it was the last time. What had been done to Amy and Bob? If Francis knew where they were, why not just surround and raid the place with guns blazing? She could see the headlines. Terrorist group hiding in Nepthys stock owner's home eliminated in daring police operation. Perhaps that was it. Francis wanted to protect Mr. Sierra's reputation. But would that reputation really be enough to forego a massive victory in the war on domestic terror? She was drying herself, it hit her. Even when the group had been locked in the bunker, there had been men. Not just outside, but even on the roof of the building. If those men were plans B through Y, then this was plan C. Amy and Bob were dangling as bait wherever the next trap was. And that wasn't here. The ground Francis had chosen was somewhere else. Last time they'd fallen into Francis's trap, Norbert had died. Who would die this time? As she came downstairs, she found Ronnie cleaning her gun and watching the news. And now it looks like, even with the virus season receding, customized face masks are here to stay.
Trouble with the funeral bill? This new startup will buy the ashes of your loved one for tobacco fertilizer. Sponsored content, the Union of Firearms Manufacturers wants to use this occasion to wish a happy Pride Month to everyone. Limited edition rainbow-colored mags and bayonets now 10% off. Victory for the Voters' Freedom Initiative, as court rules that the right to transfer your vote to your landlord in exchange for a rent discount, part of citizens' fundamental voting rights.
I hate these. I hate them so much. Style has never been more contagious.
Did I mention that happened to someone I know around here, where when COVID was starting to roll out and COVID was starting to be a thing people were afraid of, and elections had just happened, and city elections were going to happen, their landlord straight up was like going around putting flyers under everyone's doors and trying to demand that they vote for their preferred city candidates, and that if the correct candidates didn't win, they would punish their tenants by raising rates.
What? That's gotta be like bald-faced illegal, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, you gotta have a lawyer that's better and money for that and take them to court and win. And they figured that their low-paid service industry worker tenants wouldn't do that, so they decided to try and strong-arm people into voting against the renter protections that were recently voted on, and thankfully, I think won, if I remember correctly. But
if you're a landlord, I want you to think for a moment, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? What could you be doing better? The answer is not being a landlord. Moving on to more tragic news. The body count from the City Hall massacre is still rising.
earlier today, horror gripped the heart of our city's democracy when armed terrorists attacked a civilian-crowded city hall. Several members of the security forces were killed in the fierce fighting, along with a staggering number of bystanders.
According to authorities, all of the attackers were killed, and the area was successfully secured. The thing will not advance now. So far, the only slain terrorist the police have identified is the notorious Dr. Norbert Maturana, recognized by his weaponized cybernetic arm.
Known among the police as the Surgeon of Death, Maturana is reported to have been involved in dozens of attacks over the past few months.
Survivors have reported that Maturana forced them to digest unknown drugs and performed experiments on hostages.
What drives a man sworn to heal to commit such despicable acts? What in our healthcare system causes such drastic reactions?
Join me tonight on my talk show as I interview Menelaus Nilsson, who's already been cast to play terrorism's most brilliant mind in an original series. And don't miss the premiere of Surgical Evil next July, only on channel 411.
The police have had a busy day indeed. Riots have once again broken out in the lower parts of the city.
Come on, Mouse, work with me here.
As has been the case many times in the past months, the unrest seems to be fueled by widespread frustration with a prolonged water shortage.
Wide so red. Authorities have responded that irregularities in the water supply are a temporary result of the increased security measures. In a press conference earlier today, officials apologized for inconveniences and asked the people to stand behind law and order in this difficult time.
Many among the demonstrators have expressed confusion as to how disturbances at City Hall can lead to dry pipes on the other side of...
I think the police chief said it best when he explained that in times of trouble, every act of insubordination is in service to the terrorists. In a press conference earlier today, the mayor assured ordinary citizens that everything will be all right and peace will be restored. But only as long as everyone does their share and is prepared to forego some of the luxuries of peacetime. Ronnie turned off the TV. What's next?
Bob and Amy, and after that, Francis.
Knowing your ex-boyfriend, he'll be cowering somewhere with an army and a camera, so he can broadcast his smug face to everyone.
Don't call him that, but you're right. Amy and Bob aren't here, and there was nothing on the news about them.
You don't have to read your next line, but...
They've been taken so we would follow.
So whatever horrid trap is waiting for us, they're the bait? It's kind of brilliant. What are you gonna do?
It's time we fought fire with fire. Or water with water, as it were.
I don't think that... You know what? I'm willing to hear you out.
You skipped my line.
I didn't.
Francis has to die, and so does anyone foolish enough to stand in his defense. We're going to take the bait.
What about the remaining copy of the contracts? Josephine shook her head.
I'm done trying to take down Francis by hitting his profits or allies or reputation. It's already started. They're cutting the slums off from the water. There's no time for contrived plans or lawsuits. We go straight to him.
I like it, but where will we find him? I don't see him standing guard on Bob and Amy's jail cell.
You're right. He would be somewhere far away, managing from a distance like he did at City Hall. We don't even know where that jail cell is.
Actually, we do. Ronnie pointed to the floor. There by the sofa was a faint red X. Next to it there was a small bench. She lifted it and turned it around. On its bottom were the letters G-A-R. The R was faint and messy. It's lipstick.
God bless you, Amy. Don't you worry, we're coming.
So they're in the gardens. It makes sense. That place is like Francis's personal kingdom.
Exactly. No one to disturb whatever ambush he has laid for us. Only, he won't be dumb enough to be there himself.
Maybe we should bust our friends out before we try to track him down. Josephine shook her head.
I've a better idea. We make him come to us.
So we're just forgoing the whole thing about burning all the contracts now and just going right for the head?
Seems like it.
Wow. Amy was in pain. They'd been sitting on the couch and arguing when, suddenly... She didn't exactly remember. There had been flashing lights, loud noises, loud bangs, and unspeakable agony in her back. That's where the pain was coming from. She began to remember. The men who'd burst into the house and tased them both. Bob had refused to go down quietly and had wrestled with his captors for some time. Brave Bob. While they fought, Amy had reached for her lipstick to leave a clue to Josephine, but hadn't had the time. Wait, then... Immediately after that, someone had injected her with something cold.
Maybe they're not in the gardens.
Yep. Whatever it was, it must have knocked her out instantly. Her head was still a bit clouded, her mouth was very dry. It was hot in here. She realized she was chained to something, a pipe. There were dozens of steel pipes running along the narrow corridor. She heard someone breathing and noticed Bob. He was right in front of her, still unconscious, chained to a big pipe, bolted at ceiling level. How had she not seen him earlier? She sighed. Her head wasn't functioning properly. Looking around her gave her very little information, just red lights, metal everywhere, and hot, damp air. Even their clothes were wet on account of the leaking steam pipe between them. Wet. The CWS. They were at the CWS. Or somewhere in its bowels. Had Josephine designed something this ugly? That felt out of character. Maybe they were in the gardens instead, somewhere in its basement. A dark hallway wasn't much to go on. Bob began to wake up. His muscles twitched and his face struggled to form expressions, only to slide back to a stone-faced slumber. It would take a while before Amy had any company. She had some time to think. The guards hadn't just killed them, there had to be a reason for that. At first she thought of her father. Could he have intervened? Father was powerful, but not powerful enough to defy Francis Brabeck. More likely he knew nothing of the whole affair. No one had interrogated them, or at least her, at any point. They knew all they wanted to know. They'd known where to find them. How? Beatrice couldn't have given them that information. Someone must have been following them, observing the house. I don't know about that. How much do you trust Beatrice? The thought was chilling. In any case, she could think of only one reason why Francis would take them alive. They were bait. The thought terrified her. Josephine, Norbert, and Ronnie would not hesitate to come after them.
Well, 2 out of 3.
Well, oof. To this trap. She reached across the hallway and began to administer pointed kicks to Bob's shins at regular intervals. It was time to wake up. Grandpa's put on a little makeup.
Interesting. So someone saw that she was going to leave a clue, and then capitalized on that and left a red herring.
Yep. You know, you've always had a go big or go home philosophy, about these things, but
you think this might be too much?
Oh, I've thought that about everything you've done since you ordered me to break the shade umbrella at our building. This one's so suicidal, my pessimism doesn't cover it.
Thanks. Surpassing your expectations is what I do best.
Why don't you surpass them first, and then we'll praise your genius together. They were nestled in their stolen ambulance atop a small hill, deep down in the gutter of the city. Absolute chaos reigned. Security forces were deployed in the thousands to enforce a curfew, guard the closed water shops, and protect the pipes from sabotage. Thirsty citizens had come out onto the streets in the tens of thousands, demanding that water shops be opened and the flow of water restored. The results were predictable. Gunshots echoed in the distance, nearly drowned out by the angry chants of the residents. This is going to get very violent very fast.
Yep. All we have to do is move the violence uptown.
You make it sound easy.
I'll leave it to you to make it look easy as well.
Where do we start?
Remember the water shop we broke into before to get the sweepers?
I'd rather not.
Me neither, but it's the largest shop in this area. If we can take it for the people...
They might listen to what we have to say, or just drink their fill and go home.
Could you blame them? We aren't offering anybody security or happiness.
Revenge is a powerful incentive. How do we hit the shop?
I was thinking the same way as last time. You got any more small bombs?
They drove... It's not like they didn't work. They drove their vehicle around the corner and saw their target. It was surrounded by sandbags, steel plates, and armored cars. At least a dozen dark figures stood in position, manning the machine guns and searchlights. An angry crowd of people had surrounded the place and were slowly approaching. This is madness.
This is water.
I was gonna say, this is, as of yet, unnamed city. Why didn't they just take the water away? Or pour it down the drain?
Francis wants this. The more violence breaks out, the easier the repression will be to justify. What do you think? Can we take it?
With a tank or two, sure. An airstrike would be even better.
Suppose we have one pistol and nothing to lose.
I wouldn't bet my money on it. Are you up for a climb?
One of my hands is a mangled mess, and I'm afraid of heights.
On we go, then. She smiled at her. Josephine chuckled and gave her a quick kiss. It felt good. She gave her another kiss and then a puzzled frown. I didn't expect you to be in a kissing mood. What with all that happened earlier.
Me neither, but honestly, when we kissed at the restaurant, that felt like it was long overdue. We might not have chances to waste. I love Norbert too, and I'll never get a chance to tell him again.
Oh, yeah.
I hate myself for not being able to choose between you two when I still had a choice. Don't take this the wrong way, but I still couldn't choose, even now.
I see.
I understand if that's one too many caveats for you.
When you said you loved Norbert too, did you mean?
Yes, I love you too. I think I've loved you since the day we met.
I love you too. And I don't mind the caveats. I watched you die once. After that, everything else seems a bit trivial. So, are we then something?
I think we're the city's most wanted criminals. Aside from that, I think that's a discussion for another time. Accomplice.
Accomplice. Oh, that'd be so good! Josephine left the car, and Ronnie frowned. We get another time. They snuck over to the pipe, carefully keeping an eye on the crowd and then the guards. You can tell the guards here are on edge. They're spinning those searchlights like crazy.
Maybe they're hoping the light will hold the attackers back?
They're wrong. Keep moving. They climbed up to the water pipe. Josephine's hands still throbbed with incredible pain every time she pulled herself upwards. Ronnie climbed ahead of her, using just one hand. She had a gun in the other. Slowly they drew closer to the pipe. It seemed easier than last time, despite the wounds. It didn't rain, which helped of course, but there was more to it. Josephine just wasn't afraid. She knew she'd get there. As they crawled along the pipe towards the top floor entrance, they were careful not to make a sound. They needn't have worried. The chanting crowd was now so close that the guards were firing warning shots into the air. As Josephine lifted her head to look, she was astonished by the size of it. There were thousands of people filling up the streets as far as the eye could see. Most weren't armed with anything but buckets and canisters, but some, particularly in the front rows, displayed pistols, shotguns, clubs, or knives. If this sea of people flooded the compound, the tiny unit of guards would be swept away in moments, and no amount of searchlights and machine guns would stop it. Josephine realized she may have been worrying about the wrong people. Then again, all the guards would have to do now is mow enough into them down that the rest would scatter. Either way, many people were going to die. They reached the point where the pipe entered the building. Fuck.
Keep it down. What's going on?
They've blocked the hole.
What?
There's a net covering it.
Crap. Can we get through it?
I brought a grenade from City Hall.
We don't want to blow up the bridge we're standing on.
How fast does the water flow in the pipe?
I like the way you think, but pretty fast, and it's going the wrong way.
Well then, something simpler. Ronnie stood up on the pipe, grabbed the net, and climbed it to the roof. Come on then. We have to get inside. Sighing, she inched closer to the net. Well, I guess this is what I'm doing with my day. Lieutenant Pond was cold. He couldn't understand why Lauren Incorporated couldn't afford warmer clothes for its frontline personnel. He shook his water bottle. It's about halfway done. The supplies at the shop were strictly off limits. The mob was approaching fast. Pond's repeated calls for reinforcements had gone unanswered. Everyone was crazy all of a sudden. He was determined not to let his growing dread show itself to his men. Just this morning, it had been so exciting. Vacations had been cancelled, everyone was told to gear up, and a personal message from Francis Brabeck himself was played to the troops. If he did well today, Pond could expect a good recommendation from the CEO of Nephthys. That sort of recognition landed people internships. Then it had quickly gotten boring. The unit had been stationed at the barracks for the hours as news trickled in. An attack on City Hall, riots and scattered action around the lower city. He'd been so frustrated that he wasn't in the thick of it, and so happy when they were finally deployed. Now he didn't know what to think. Private property had to be protected, sure, but why not move the water to a safer place? And why not disperse the mob with drones and tear gas? The way it was going, it seemed like command had abandoned them. His second-in-command, Sergeant Niedermeyer, was looking at the crowd through binoculars. The sergeant was much older than him, not many years from retirement. Pond hurried to get his own binoculars out. He screened the crowd, trying to spot whatever it was that the elderly sergeant seemed so worried about. Nothing stood out.
See anything, Sergeant?
Sir, I was trying to gauge what the situation is farther back. I can't confirm, but it seems folks back there aren't armed. All the dangerous ones are up front.
Should we open fire then?
Sir, if you ask my opinion, that will likely lead to...
Something crashed into Niedermeyer. Before Pond could react, the same thing happened to him. He realized he was on the ground being held down by someone.
Put your guns down.
Josephine and Ronnie, having charged the two men from the inside, had tackled them and pinned them down. The leaders had been easy to spot. Both had been holding binoculars. The snake was without a head. Only, the rest of it was now pointing some 20 rifles their way.
Shoot! Shoot!
Josephine pressed the young man's face into the street with her knee. The lieutenant was boyish, skinny, and short. They had mutually agreed that Ronnie would handle the burly sergeant.
We have grenades. Drop your guns or I'll blow us up.
She wasn't lying. Both of them were brandishing frag grenades above their heads, clearly visible and with one hand on the pin. The young lieutenant was still trying to give orders.
Shoot! Shoot! Shoot!
The men were hesitating, looking over their shoulders. They were not comfortable turning their backs to so many armed rioters. Listen up. I'm Ronnie Janis. I worked at Lauren. I might know some of you. I won't let the mob hurt you. Put your guns down, and I'll personally guarantee your safety.
For fuck's sake, drop your guns, lads and lasses. I ain't dying for some plastic bottles.
No! Maintain position. Get this thing off me. Ah! Shut your trap or I'll shove this bomb down your throat.
One by one, the soldiers chose to obey the sergeant. Throw your rifles and pistols down, and back away with your hands up. The guards hurried to obey. A few seemed almost happy that someone else was taking over their desperate position.
Now, take your handcuffs and cuff the hands of the person next to you. Once your hands are restrained, I want you to lie down.
And do it so we can see, otherwise I'll pull this pin, and you'll all get to reincarnate as snails. When half the men were secured down, Josephine ordered the procedure repeated until only one guard was standing. This one was a woman, and she was visibly terrified.
Good. Now, lie down and put your hands behind your back.
She was thrown over mid-sentence as the young Lieutenant Pond rushed towards the pile of rifles. He didn't make it. Instead, he tumbled face first into the guns. Ronnie was holding a pistol. She had been faster.
Medic.
The lieutenant was rolling over in a rapidly growing puddle of blood. It looked all too familiar to Josephine. Ronnie got up and holstered her gun. Go help your rash officer, Sergeant. The sergeant nodded and went to the boy. He was bleeding from his thigh and shaking like a leaf.
He needs to get to a hospital.
You're free to try and carry him through that ocean of people who hate you. I'd take him inside and see if that can't be tied off for now. Speaking of, Ronnie, would you take that loudspeaker and declare that this shop has been taken by the good guys?
Aye, aye. Josephine watched as the sergeant and the young woman helped the wounded lieutenant inside. Ronnie grabbed a loudspeaker and stood up on the sandbags. She immediately dove down as bullets whizzed overhead, barely missing her. Tough crowd tonight. I didn't know they were the good guys. I don't think they know we're the good guys.
Crap, of course not. Hand me the loudspeaker. No. Wait, run inside and get a hose. That ought to calm them down.
Ronnie ran inside and came running back with a hose. She began spraying the crowd.
Listen up, this shop has been liberated. There is water for everyone. If all the families could...
Another series of gunshots and bullets tore through the air. That was too close. We need more time to talk to them.
Sergeant, help me get your colleagues inside.
Niedermeyer nodded, and together they helped the cuffed guards up. None of the soldiers needed any directing or persuading, but were all too happy to get behind the bulletproof walls. Meanwhile, Ronnie ran back and forth, trying to secure all the arms at the compound before the protesters could get their hands on them. Lieutenant Pond was going pale. Too pale.
Niedermeyer, I'll get you court-martialed for this.
Sir, you know well not to talk too much. I'm trying to stop the bleeding.
Ronnie closed the doors and locked them tight, just in time as the crowd swarmed over the barricades and smashed the searchlights. Weren't we supposed to be on their side?
We are on their side, they just don't know it.
Locking ourselves in with all the guards and all the water sure isn't helping.
Do we have the loudspeaker?
Shit, no, it's out there in the yard. People were now banging on the windows of the shop, chanting, "Water! Water! Water!" I'm not sure we could drown that out in any case.
Look, I know it's not my business and we're your prisoners, but what are you even trying to do? Those people will slaughter us like pigs.
We're trying to direct them towards the real pigs. I'll go talk to them.
The hell you will, they'll cut you to pieces.
It's a risk I have to take. Why would they follow us if we're scared of them?
She glanced at the window and the angry people pounding it. There was power and rage in their faces. But that was there just to mask the frustration and the fear. They heard glass break. They were pelting the upper floor windows with rocks. Whoever built the shop had decided to save in expenses. Ronnie cocked her rifle. If you're going to go, you have to do it now. Josephine nodded. She unlocked the door, opened it just enough to squeeze out, and quickly shut it again. Then she turned to face the people. Immediately, a huge man grabbed her and slammed her into the door. Open the door, girl. Josephine looked into his eyes. A few months ago, this huge man could have intimidated her into tears. The man was somewhere in his late 40s, balding fast, and clearly spent time at the gym. His face was full of hate, and his mouth was twisted by wrath into a murderous growl, but his eyes were deeply terrified. Josephine stared directly into them. Behind the anger, there was someone about to lose their home, someone who couldn't pay his bills, someone whose shower wasn't working. The rest of the crowd was waiting to see what would happen.
Are you thirsty?
Of course I'm fucking thirsty. Open that door or I'll...
Save your strength. Angry yelling will only make you thirstier.
She raised her voice.
My name is Josephine Lace. I'm here to help you.
The man looked baffled. Josephine could hear chatter among the crowd. Isn't she the terrorist?
No, I think she's some death. This big shot. I think she was on the news.
Josephine sighed.
How many of you have stood in line by a broken water pipe? Raise your hands, I want to see them.
Carefully, a few hands went up, then many more.
Then you've met me. We broke those water pipes. How many of you have built some contraption to collect rainwater?
More hands, many more.
We gave out instructions to do that.
A few nods, some approving murmurs, and a spreading, curious silence.
And we bombed the pipes in this neighborhood.
Gasps, curses, and more confused faces. How do we know you aren't full of shit?
6 months ago, Nephthys cut the water from my house, just like they cut your water today. We put up a fight, and they murdered 57 people. They tried to kill me too.
She opened her coat, and the glow lit up her face.
They shot me in the heart.
The crowd went silent, finally. Why should we care? Get out of the way or I'll shoot you again. We'll see if they can replace your head, someone shouted. The big man let go of Josephine. Shut your face, Wesley. What's your point? If all you said is true, why are you in my way?
Say you loot this shop. What then? Some of you get water, most of you don't. And tomorrow you'll be thirsty again. And the day after that, and the day after that. Until you die. And those guards are not to blame.
What else can we do? Josephine ignored the question.
You know what's most brilliant about all this? Up there, the rich folks are having steaks in their towers and gulping down ice-cold, crystal-clear water. Break all the windows and pummel all the guards you can, but you won't even interrupt the dinners of the people behind this. We have power together. Do you want to waste it marching around here, or do you want to make a difference? What's the company that claims to own your water? Who's the man who thinks he can choose who lives and who dies? The name on this shop, your water bill, and every pipe in the city is Nephthys. And the man behind Nephthys, well, you've seen his face, and I know where he lives. If we are going to riot, shouldn't we riot in his living room?
Too many guards there, you get us killed. It was saying we want to end up just like you.
Well, I'm alive. If you stay here, you'll be shot by the police, or terminally deprived of water, or deported to the desert by Nephthys. Your only shot, our only shot, is to scare them so completely that they won't think of doing it ever again.
She was starting to get through to the people. The big man who moments ago had nearly attacked her was now standing next to her, facing the crowd. Do you have a plan, then? He asked.
Yes, I do. But before we get to that, who wants a drink?
Bob awoke, not to the stinging agony in his back or the million drills tearing his head apart, but to being steadily kicked in the legs.
Stop that, for fuck's sake, I'm awake.
Are you, though?
No.
Well, there you go. Kick, 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 kick. His eyes were still foggy, but he could make out a young woman opposite him. Amy. She looked angry.
I'll believe you if you stay awake this time. This time? Oh, you've been trying for a while now, haven't you? You could say that. How are you?
Bob closed his eyes for a moment.
It hurts everywhere. Did we get beaten up? You did, I think. My memories are hazy, too. My knuckles hurt. I'm guessing I broke a jaw or two before going down.
He tried to think. Something wasn't right about all this. Where were they and why? His mouth was so dry that talking was hard.
I don't get it. Why am I not dead? 'Cause being locked in a basement with you sure ain't my heaven. I think they're holding us as bait. Bait? You mean for the others? Fuck.
Bob tried to wrestle himself out of his restraints.
Stop wasting your strength. We need to think. Make a plan. Maybe we can find some way to contact... How exactly will you think your way out of here? Will you write a poignant editorial? You've never actually been in prison, have you? What has that got to do with anything? Why are you yelling at me? You've got your head in the clouds. There's no guards around us. Now's the best chance we'll ever get. Fancy escape plans only work in movies. What do you mean my head's in the clouds? I mean exactly that. In your world, things always work out. There's someone you can call, some plan that'll do it. We're not there anymore. So, we're in your world, where problems disappear by punching them. No, we're in my world, where problems don't go away at all. Ever. The best that can happen is getting away. And that's your plan? To get away? How far exactly? To wherever the others are. We can't let them march into a trap. This time you'll have to pull your weight. I'm sorry, what? I've fought just as long and hard for this cause as you. Yeah, because I've fought my whole life to stay afloat with people like your dad stepping on my face.
He was angry. He didn't know why. Rich girl hadn't gotten them imprisoned.
I'm not my father. It's time you stopped treating me like it. I'm done trying to convince you that you can trust me. I'll trust you when you show commitment. You have your rich parents and your comfy life that you can go back to. One phone call and your daddy will get you to some offshore private boarding school to finish your degree while recovering from your mental breakdown. 2 phone calls and you'll be on TV telling how lucky you are to be safely back with your family, with a book deal to get your brand started, while the rest of us are buried beneath the foundations of this or that skyscraper.
Amy said nothing. She bit her lip and looked away. Bob cursed silently. He hadn't intended to be that harsh. Sometimes you're bursting to yell things that really shouldn't be yelled.
Look,
When you look at the catch we have, funny how much world-class terrorists look like turds chained to a wall.
All the guards are getting voices like this. You can't stop it.
Alright.
There's no stopping it. 2 guards were approaching from around the corner.
Funny how much prison guards can look like wet diapers with gas masks.
Hey now! You can talk it all you want, but only one of us can make it through tonight.
I agree. Now, what can I do for you before I rip this pipe out and drown you in hot water?
The guard punched Bob in the stomach.
That's for the threats. Funnily enough, there is something you can do. See, Jim here has a sister.
The second guard sighed. Dude, cut it out. The other did not.
Larissa looks an awful look. Oh. Only Larissa looks an awful lot like Jim's former brother, whose name was Larry, if you catch my drift. What do you think of that, old man?
Bob shrugged.
I'm sure Jim is a loving sibling and takes care of his family. Unless he ain't, in which case he's on my naughty list, right after you.
Bob could swear he saw Amy smile faintly. Go, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
He raised his voice.
In fact, I think Jim's so nice to his sister that come payday, he'll take her shopping for whatever clothes she likes.
Both guards seemed slightly baffled. They were silent for a while.
Look at you being all progressive. Thought you had some man in you.
He slapped Bob in the face.
Aren't you a big boy, hitting tied-down prisoners?
I'm sorry, were you jealous?
And he punched Amy in the stomach. She gasped with pain.
That's quite enough.
Francis had appeared from around the corner, followed by an ample retinue of more guards.
Jim, you should know that Nephthys has an excellent minority outreach program if your sister is looking for work.
But only during Pride Month.
We also have a zero-tolerance policy on harassment of any kind. Eric would do well to remember that.
Aw, jeez.
Both guards stood stiff as statues.
I may be a bastard who will get everyone here murdered, but I'm not transphobic.
Finally, a progressivism win! Now you can get brutally beaten by the guards while wearing your pronoun pins. Excellent. This is what progress looks like.
Now, to the matter of you two.
Finally, the missiles we shoot over across the world will be painted rainbow colors.
Ms. Sierra, Mr. Lawson, I imagine you have some questions.
Bob began measuring him with his eyes. Francis was, as one might have guessed, tall and impeccably dressed. He even smelled good.
You're holding us as bait, which means you haven't got Josephine yet. And you're here because something ain't going according to plan. You wouldn't waste your breath otherwise. Very good, Mr. Larson. Then again, none of that was particularly hard to deduce. Your companions are indeed yet to be captured, though we actually have a fairly good idea of where they are. If you do, then why waste time talking to us?
Francis frowned.
She is determined to rescue you from the gardens. To that end, she has taken unexpectedly drastic measures. I fear the final death toll of her futile crusade will be tragic. You do realize you have some influence on that matter. Indeed, and it is my intention to save lives, with your help. Says the man who plans to kill half the city. Trust me, if I could achieve my vision with no sacrifice, I would have done so. Violence revolts me. But I can't. Progress comes with a heavy price. My only consolation is that a brighter future awaits those who make it through. Convenient that you get to choose who that is. I'm doing no such thing. All I've done is set the wheels in motion. I'm sure people will die in the aftermath, but you can hardly charge me with murder. Except, of course, for that of Miss Lace. She will die tonight knowing her cause dies with her. She must have pissed you off bad. I'm guessing you don't take rejection well. Ms. Lace is guilty of bombings, as are you. I gave her multiple chances to avert her course. Every time she has chosen the path of more violence.
Says the man that... Ah!
She will pay for refusing me. You two may not have to. Listening to this is punishment enough. My head already hurts without your speeches.
Francis frowned.
How lucky for me, then, that you have no choice. You, by which I mean we, left a note from Ms. Lace, directing her to rescue you from the gardens. Right now, she is on her way there. We are in the CWS, too far away to intervene before casualties start mounting. My offer is simple. Come with me to confront her. Lives can be saved, including yours. Hard pass. Yeah, I'm comfortable right here as well, thank you very much. I'm disappointed that you cannot see the gravity of this situation. Let me spell it out for you. By the time the sun rises tomorrow, Ms. Lace will have died alongside everyone who followed her.
He turned to Amy and looked her in the eyes.
The police will eventually find out who gave her aid, who provided her with weapons-grade acid, and who let her live in their house. Those people, innocent people, are the ones who will pay the price for your stubbornness.
Fuck you. How can you think threatening my family will help you?
Francis shrugged.
The police know where your group hid during your terror campaign. They also know that during that time your parents visited their home, saw it occupied by strangers carrying firearms, and yet failed to alert the police. The only reasonable conclusion is that they were involved in the conspiracy. A similar story is true of your friend Beatrice. She handed the acid over to Dr. Maturana in a public place, just moments before a horrendous terror attack. She and your parents will be charged with aiding and abetting several deadly acts of terrorism, unless they have someone on their side who can bury the charges. Someone wealthy, powerful, good-looking, heroic, help me out here. I'm
Insipid.
Anyway.
And you would do that if I helped you?
Francis smiled.
It would be my pleasure to help.
And what about us?
I'm afraid the crimes you have committed are too grievous to pardon completely, but I can arrange a comfortable exile for the both of you.
Why would I believe you would actually do that?
I know you see me as a ruthless narcissist, but good businessmen know how to reward service. Good businessmen also recognize talent when they see it. You're one of the bravest young women I have ever met, Amy. I would very much like to work with you in the future. While I'm in exile? It would be temporary. You could finish your degree, Amy, and once the dust settles, you could return, be with your family. I don't think they'd accept me. They will when you're head of the Humane Water Department.
Amy's face lit up full of excitement and confusion.
You could make a difference, do something real. Build this city up instead of tearing it down.
Amy was silent for a while. Then she began sobbing.
I can't.
She sank to her knees. Francis knelt next to her.
I can't let them down. You haven't, Amy. You've been incredibly brave. You were misled. You're one of the victims, not the criminals. No. I can't have a part in their demise. I won't. You won't have to, Amy. Listen to me. Josephine Lace made her choice months ago. She died months ago. She's only walking because of a freakish accident of fate. The entire time you've known her, she's been a delusional husk living on borrowed time.
Amy was crying.
She's 10 times the leader you'll ever be.
Francis was silent for a second.
You're right, she is. Huh? I've never met anyone with her confidence. It's contagious, but you must understand that her charisma is pathological. She thinks she's invulnerable. It has led her to take ever-increasing risks, with her own life and yours.
Amy was breathing heavily. She did not respond.
Can you honestly say that her behavior isn't obsessive, even suicidal? Hey, creepy guy, get off my friend. We are not interested. You should be. I'm offering you life. I have a condition. There is very little that I cannot give you. You must extend the pardon to Bob and the others, even if they don't help you in any way. I cannot pardon Miss Lace, and I cannot imagine Sergeant Janice giving herself up. And the others?
He didn't mention Norbert.
He didn't mention Norbert or the crowds of tens of thousands of people who are about to get gunned down.
Yep.
Mr. Larson and Dr. Maturana can join you in exile. One will have a well-earned retirement and the other a job at a quality hospital. I didn't agree to that. Fuck this. I'm sorry, Bob. It's the only way.
Then she forced a smile through her tears.
What do you need me to do, Mr. Brabeck? Please, call me Francis.
I know what she's doing.
Playing him?
Yeah. Taking advantage of it to get some measure of contact with... Because he intends to put her in contact with the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing so, she'll be able to alert them to where they're actually kept.
Yep.
Ronnie took a deep breath and turned around the corner. There was no one there. She gestured with her hand. A dozen or so riders passed her. Roughly half had firearms, and the others carried whatever they could find. They waited for her to take point again before charging up the stairs. The electronic ID machines were on, but there was no one to guard the gates. As the riders trespassed into the tram station proper, the machines began flashing red, sounding the alarm. Someone stopped to pummel them into silence with a sledgehammer. Ronnie smiled. Wanton destruction of property was arguably the most fun part of rioting. She and Josephine had improvised call-ups at the water shop. Anyone with military, security, or otherwise violent backgrounds was invited to join the vanguard. Hundreds had jumped at the chance, and many had called their friends, too. Behind them marched thousands of ordinary, scared people, packed as tightly as they could, and making as much noise as possible. Ronnie was a little bit ahead of the masses with a select group of the angriest, best-armed people they could find. A few hours ago, many of them had been shooting at her. She had to stay focused. They were near the end of the stairs, close to the platform. As soon as Ronnie stepped into view of the platform, she was met by a hail of gunfire. She dove as bullets whizzed above her, puncturing the concrete and letting loose an avalanche of dust and debris. The harrowing, ear-piercing drumming of the guns continued for a few seconds before someone's commanding voice on the other side shut it down. Thanking all the gods, and especially her quick reflexes, Ronnie pressed herself down onto the concrete floor and tried to look up. Security had built a barricade of sorts on the platform. On closer examination, the barricade turned out to be a toppled-over vending machine. There couldn't be many of them, but it didn't take many if they all had automatic rifles. She glanced over her shoulder. One man was down, his corpse thrown back down the stairs and smashed against a wall. What was his name? Wesley. Wesley had been shot. The rest of Ronnie's little crew had hunkered down, hugging the stairs while shaking like leaves. A couple had thrown down their rifles and fled in panic. Ronnie crawled backward until she was safe in the stairwell. She forgot she wasn't leading professional soldiers, but scared, barely armed posse. Is everyone else all right? The rioters nodded. Some pointed at Wesley's corpse. Nothing we can do for him now. You take his gun. You run outside and give the signal. Keep your heads down. She had to repeat the orders a few times, but in the end, they were followed quite admirably. Alright. I know you're scared, but we can do this. Don't panic, and watch where you're shooting. They waited in silence. Ronnie lay on the edge of the platform on her back, using her small mirror to scout the guard position. The guards were doomed. They must have known it. No help was coming, and the angry mob was surrounding the tram station. But as long as they had bullets, there was no charging at them. There was a low rumble. Ronnie smiled. Fire! Ronnie turned around and began shooting at the tiny black spots peeking out from behind the barricade. They responded with a deafening burst that tore pieces off the wall and out of the floor around her. Fortunately, it was as hard for them to hit her as it was the other way around. Someone opened fire right next to her. One of her shivering subordinates had mustered enough courage to join the fight, or at least to spray bullets blindly over his head while keeping his face far from the danger. The rumbling continued. It was louder now. Ronnie could see that the guards had taken shelter. They'd figured out what was happening, only it was too late. With a screech and a hiss, a train emerged along the tracks to the platform. As it slowly ground to a halt, rifles popped out of its windows and opened fire on the security guards from their flank and rear. Ronnie looked away. She'd hoped to avoid this. The doors of the train opened and protesters stormed out. Josephine was among them. Oh, we got to recharge when we got to the house.
Yeah. Ronnie!
Ronnie got up and ran to her. They embraced and kissed. 3 down.
5 to go. You're covered in dust.
Count me lucky. They shot one of us. It was my fault. I was careless.
Don't go there. I'm glad you're okay.
There was a gunshot behind them. Ronnie turned around, bringing her rifle to bear. Some of the guards had survived the storm of lead. They were now on their knees. One of the rioters was taking aim with a pistol.
Halt!
The man fired and a guard went limp, dropping to the ground.
I said halt!
Ronnie rushed in and took the pistol away. We don't gun down prisoners.
I don't get it, the man yelled. Wasn't the point to get revenge?
Revenge on the right people.
She punched the man in the face.
You've lost your right to bear arms. Now handcuff the prisoners while I watch.
Some of the imprisoned guards burst into tears. A small crowd had gathered around them. Same drill as last time. Take the guns and prepare to move on. This was the 3rd station they'd taken. At every place they'd stripped the guards of their guns and opened the doors for the people. They'd taken over a number of trains. Tram company workers, who were also going thirsty, had willingly broken into the hangars and stolen the rest. At every station they'd taken, trains were filling up with citizens willing to join the fight. And station by station, the tram tracks were taking the fight to Francis.
I can't believe that bastard saw 5 men surrender and immediately decided to shoot them all.
Yeah, war doesn't exactly bring out the good in people.
I know, I don't know what I was thinking. It's frankly a miracle that this mob is following us at all.
We were the only people with a plan.
Still, remember the people at the water shop? Those in the back, the families and elderly, and that scared accountant.
What about them? We gave them water and most of them went home blessing your name.
I've always known I was fighting for those people. It's a bit upsetting to see that the people fighting with me are so different.
I get it. It's easy to help a family of 5 children with big eyes and cute overalls. Helping a murderer or fighting with one is another matter.
It is, and we need a lot of murderers on our side if we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
What's on your mind? You don't think we can pull this off?
Ronnie was silent. She was looking at the glass wall on the opposite side of the train, been entirely composed of big windows. Now every last one was shattered. How many rifles were shooting out of that train?
Maybe 30. Why?
There were 7 guards behind the vending machine. Your 30 rifle shattered every last window but only killed 2 men. That murder doubled the kill count by himself.
You're saying?
They aren't soldiers. We're definitely going up against a lot of soldiers. This could end very badly. Josephine nodded.
It could, but our numbers are growing. Come on, let's get on the train. 5 stations to go.
Ronnie lingered for a moment, looking at the shattered window panels. She made sure the 3 living guards were tied up but otherwise unhurt, and gave each a jug of water. Then she stepped onto the crowded train and gave a thumbs up to the woman remote driving the train from her seat. Slowly, they left station number 3. Behind them, another train rolled to a stop, and eager protesters began filling it up. Some were brandishing guns, many more were carrying knives, hatchets, crowbars, or just sharpened shovels. All knew they were marching towards the greatest feast of violence the city had seen in decades. Some were scared, others couldn't wait. A small crowd paused to gawk at the security guards, both live and dead. The tied-up guards kept their heads down and didn't respond to insults or questions. Tears in their eyes, they sighed with relief when the mob eventually got bored and moved on towards more exciting events. In the train, the mood was jubilant. The self-styled freedom fighters were handing out cigars and passing around bottles of booze. I doubt that'll improve their marksmanship.
We can't deny them drinks after a victory, even if you fought most of the battle on your own.
She put one hand on Ronnie's cheek. Not alone. I knew you'd be there, saving my ass.
I'd like to think our relationship to be one of mutually beneficial ass-saving.
She gave Ronnie a peck on the cheek. Someone tapped her shoulder. It was a young girl. Maybe Amy's age, but shorter and sturdier.
Boss lady?
She said.
Call me Joe, but yes? My cousin's with a construction crew. Their bosses told them to keep blasting the bedrock despite the curfew and riot and all. Do they need help? We can make calls. I'm sure we can get someone there. There are groups rioting all over the city.
The girl shook her head.
No, they drove the guards away themselves. They want to join us. Can we wait at the next stop? There's almost 100 of them. We can, but not for long. We're in a hurry. Tell them to make it quick and bring some of their equipment. We may need it.
The girl nodded and went to make the call. Boss lady? I like the sound of that. It's like my favorite movie.
I'd prefer it if they used my name.
Also, I know this might sound weird, but why are you standing in a moving tram without holding on to anything? There are handles on the roof, you know.
Are you crazy? I'm not getting swarmed by pickpockets. I'll have you know I have a very important meeting in the gardens.
I meant no disrespect, Miss Boss Lady. They were brought in an elevator to the roof of the CWS. The fresh air felt good after spending God knows how long in the steamy basement. How long had they been there? Amy had no idea. Her entire body was... oops. Shaking, and she was incredibly thirsty. Hold on.
There we go.
There we go. It was dark. They had been held prisoner for at least most of the day. Embracing the strong breeze that made her eyes tear up, she looked around. Had Josephine really designed this beast? The CWS was an ugly, spider-like construct. Numerous smaller buildings, which Amy presumed to be water tanks, were connected to a large, hulking main tank. On its roof there was a small cube-like room. A bridge led to it, starting not far from the helipad.
What's that? Much as I appreciate your choice to help me, I'd be a fool to give you details on this place. Do forgive my paranoia. Of course, I understand.
Amy and Francis had taken one elevator, while a heavily resisting Bob and a half-dozen guards had taken another. On the roof there was a helipad with a prepared chopper.
Is a prepared chopper like a prepared piano? Like it has various sorts of objects attached to it for avant-garde performances?
Bob had been restrained and gagged. He was glaring at Amy with a burning fire in his eyes.
Please don't treat Bob too harshly. He doesn't mean it. He's a good man. Loyal, but naive.
Oh, his kind often are. Strong and good-hearted, but so easily misled. Bob is fortunate to have someone more educated to look after him, and make better choices than he would.
Just remember, I'm not doing this because I like you. I have my conditions.
And they will be met in full as soon as this tragedy is concluded.
I'll hold you to your word. Who's that?
Francis turned to see his tall guard officer marching towards them.
That would be Commander Norris on his way to Morris, even. I can't tell them apart. I'm sorry.
Oh, we've been telling you for weeks, man.
On his way to tell me that I should remain here in safety. Take my guests to the chopper while I have a word with the commander.
As they were escorted to their seats, Amy watched as Commander Morris, who was even taller than Francis, yelled something she couldn't hear. The guards made Amy and Bob sit opposite one another and handcuffed them together. Then Jim and Eric sat next to them, rifles in hand.
Is this really necessary?
Orders from the boss. Sorry.
You don't happen to know where we're going or what we're doing?
I do happen to know. You'll know when the boss decides so. The guards fastened both their seatbelts. The helicopter was open from the sides. Hey, you want to know a good place to buy clothes for women, would you?
Thinking about your sister?
Well, yeah, kinda. I want to get her something nice, but I don't really know where.
I'd say your best bet is to ask her where she wants to go and then go with her. Spend some time together.
Maybe I'll do that, though. Say Larissa has fucking expensive taste.
Don't you get hazard pay for this kind of work?
Like bonuses? Why would I? It's a dangerous line of work in general. I knew that when I signed up.
Yeah, but aren't nights like this quite exceptional? You're going up against a known terrorist.
I don't know why you care, but the company policy states that bonuses are awarded when injured in combat. And I'd still rather not get shot.
Does the security business have a union?
It is the official policy of Nephthys that unions are a divisive force in the workplace. We're like a family here.
God, whenever they bring out that we're like a family here, run the fuck away. Run the fuck away. We're like a family means they're going to exploit your goodwill and positivity to get more labor out of you that won't be compensated. I wish someone had told me that like a decade ago.
Yeah.
But no, if their angle is we're like a family here, they're trying to convince you that the hard work that you do that go above and beyond just is something you should do and you should not expect to be compensated for it. That's what they're trying to teach you. Do not fall for it. Sorry, that brought up something real for a moment there.
The workplace should be seen as one community, not two communities at war.
Yes, sir. Couldn't have said it better myself, sir.
Why so curious, Miss Sierra? Has Mr. Larson gotten to you? You once wrote an editorial using more or less the same words as I just did.
Francis was walking towards them. The angry officer was walking away, still looking furious.
We've had plenty of time to talk. I've spent the last few months chained to Bob, either metaphorically or actually.
She shook the chains that bound her and Bob together so tightly that she could constantly smell his breath.
I'm sorry that I have to keep you restrained. After the fight, I can have you separated.
What did he want?
He told me that if I died on this stupid stunt, he would piss on my grave.
Charming fellow.
His charm isn't why I hired him.
Francis nodded to the guard named Eric, who tapped the pilot on the shoulder. Immediately, the chopper began to rise. Amy glanced at Bob, who was still gagged and looking livid. She tried to give him a sympathetic look. They flew over the city, low enough that the tallest towers still loomed above them. The city was quite dark. Most people stayed in their houses and businesses were closed. The farther you looked, the darker it got. Downtown was pitch black, and it took Amy a while to realize why. The water was missing. No streams of glittering colors crisscrossed the night. But that was behind them. Ahead were the gleaming towers of Uptown and the splendid waterfalls of the gardens.
So, what's Josephine up to?
You'll see in a moment.
What's your favorite building? Mine's H9. I think 76 is pretty cool, though. Oh my god. Who's that?
He's just some guy.
Oh my god, it's Bob. Oh no. We found the real killer. Francis muttered something onto the radio and the pilot swept down, flying low above a wide street. Not a street, the tram line. And it was crowded. Thousands of little lights swarmed around the stations and the roads close to them. Columns of trams were making their way up the tracks. Bob was interested too, and as they reached to different sides for a look, their chain pulled tight and bit into Amy's arm.
Ow! Bob, stay close to me. Francis, what is happening down there? Good lord, what is happening down there?
Aurora
Borealis. Ms. Lace has used her signature charisma to whip the good people of this city into a murderous frenzy. The crowd is already in the tens of thousands, far too large for anyone to control. It seems they've been assaulting tram stations one by one, and then bringing more rioters forward by the trainload.
It's amazing.
Amazingly tragic, perhaps. More than 50 people have already been murdered, businesses have been looted. And as can be expected, what few guards stood in their way have fired into the crowd. This is on track to be the most destructive riot in the history of the city.
I assume you have a plan to stop them?
I'm never content with just one plan. Right now, there are two ways this could go. What I hope is that Miss Lace cares about you two enough to abandon this motley uprising and meet us personally. That way only guilty people pay the price.
Don't pretend you're going to give Josephine a fighting chance.
Francis smiled.
Ms. Lace has already escaped many times from traps I thought were foolproof. Her little insurgency ends tonight if I must end it with my bare hands on her throat.
Oh, what's the alternative if she doesn't take the bait?
See that?
Francis pointed to another mass of lights that was ahead of them, running across the tram lines and the streets near it. She could see searchlights and the flashing lights of police cars. The lights reflected the visors and body armor of hundreds of troops.
Is that the police?
Private security. This task is too challenging for public servants. If the rioters reach those positions and try to push through, they will be met by an impassable hail of bullets. And behind them, the security forces will unleash tanks in the streets and airstrikes on the tram lines. Thousands will die.
Airstrikes in the middle of the city?
Only as a last resort, to help prevent a massacre of civilians and police officers uptown. I know you don't agree with my vision, but surely you understand that ordinary people live in the towers around the gardens. All of them are in danger of getting murdered if these rioters somehow make it through the police.
Ordinary people.
And none of them are in any way involved in this affair.
As Francis spoke, they flew over a luxury hotel, opposite to the gardens. Francis lived there, Amy remembered. It was brightly lit, and the terrace on its roof was full of people. The residents were cheering the police on, waiting for tonight's entertainment to begin, she realized. There was a large swimming pool on the terrace. People were swimming in it, drinking champagne. Amy began to squirm in her seat anxiously.
I could use a drink too. I'm thirsty and dizzy.
I'm sorry, I completely forgot neither of you has eaten or drunk anything in hours. As soon as we reach the gardens, I'll have you both properly nourished.
Loud bangs interrupted him, followed by cheers from the hotel beneath them. Immediately, he gestured to the pilot to slow down and hover above the hotel. Slowly, the pilot turned the chopper around. Amy took a look at Bob, who'd been sitting patiently opposite her without reacting to the conversation in any way. There was a resigned look on his face. Amy gave him a soft kick in the shins and smiled. Bob looked at her legs for a while and nodded slowly.
Planning something.
Yeah.
Francis, look!
The security had fired some kind of gas on the rapidly approaching riot. Loudspeakers were screeching in a high-pitched noise at them.
We must hurry. After tear gas comes warning shots. Then the bodies will start piling up.
Wait.
What? Don't you see how little time we have? We have to get you to call Miss Lace from the gardens as soon as...
It's my parents. They're there on the roof. It's their anniversary. They must have rented a suite. We have to rescue them.
They're completely safe in the hotel. There is no way the riot will break through the defenses.
Please, they're my parents. Can't you pick them up and have the chopper take them to safety?
I told you they are safe. I swore to the investors of this city that not a single rioter would step foot on the highest level of the city.
Amy looked down.
You shouldn't underestimate Josephine. And you definitely shouldn't underestimate Bob.
Amy flung her legs onto Bob's lap and unfastened his seatbelt with her toes. She had been honest about her thirst, but she'd also squirmed out of her shoes. Without waiting for instructions of any kind, Bob then threw himself towards her, opened her seatbelt with his hands and elbowed Eric in the face. Amy turned to Jim.
You're about to wish you were in a union.
What the? Amy grabbed him as Bob did the same to Eric, and then, mostly propelled by a grunting Bob, the four of them fell out of the chopper and into the unknown. They had been hovering much higher than Amy had thought. Nevertheless, they eventually fell straight into the swimming pool. Amy could hear screams as the chlorine-rich water enveloped her, Bob, and the two unfortunate guards. To her horror, the bottom of the pool approached them all much faster than she had thought possible. The water slowed them down somewhat, but they hit the bottom quite painfully anyway. It was impossible to hold on to the guards. It was hard enough to get the both of them swimming in the right direction. Gasping for air, they broke the surface. Bob tried to cough through his gag. Gesturing to where he dipped his head into the water, Amy reached and could just get her fingers on the buckle behind Bob's head. The gag came off. Bob surged up and began furiously coughing up water, much of which landed on Amy's face.
You know, for a while, I thought you were a traitor.
That was the plan. I figured he'd only buy my act if you were mad at me.
Smart. What now?
Get down!
They plunged deep into the pool just in time. One of the guards had made it to the edge of the pool and was now shooting at them. Hugging the bottom of the pool, Amy looked around the clear water. The other guard was still underwater, clearly unconscious. Amy gestured to Bob and they swam to him. It was Jim. Amy went for his pistol, only to be yanked back by Bob. Jim's rifle was a few meters away. Amy nodded and they made their way to it. She was running out of air. Bob grabbed the rifle and handed it to Amy. She nodded. He grabbed her by the waist and pushed with force from the bottom, propelling them upwards. They broke the surface with Bob holding Amy higher and treading water with his back to the shooting Eric. The first thing Amy heard upon reaching air was not gunshots, but the helicopter. Frances had left them. Her eyes were full of water, but she could make out the standing figure in black. Without wasting time, she shot at it. The figure fell. Then Amy looked up and saw the black chopper. She thought she could make out Frances. Bob turned around. Amy tried to aim the best she could and shot a few bursts at the chopper. She couldn't see if she'd hit anything, but the sound of the chopper became more distant. Frances had decided to focus on the other battle.
We should get that boy.
Jim, you're right. Down we go.
They dove again and emerged carrying an unconscious Jim. They waded to the edge of the pool following the stream of blood. The party crowd had scattered to the edges of the terrace. Many were frozen with terror and still squeezing their champagne glasses in white-knuckled fists. With great effort, they hoisted Jim to dry land and juggled themselves over as well. Being bound together was a bitch. As Bob searched for keys, Amy glanced at Eric. The guard was bleeding heavily, but still breathing. The blood was running into the pool like a broad river. Bob unshackled her. As she did the same for him, it was his turn to look around.
Some of these fuckers are filming us.
Plenty of social media stars in parties like this.
Should we stop them?
I don't see how being recorded can do any harm to us at this point. We should try to resuscitate Jim.
Cover me. I've done this before.
Surprised, Amy watches Bob begin pushing heavily on Jim's chest and periodically giving him air. Jim didn't respond in any way. But Bob wouldn't stop. After a while, Amy began to get anxious. More guards were surely on their way. She looked at the garden. She couldn't see the chopper, but she was reasonably certain that that's where Frances had landed.
Bob, I don't think he's gonna wake up.
I do.
And Bob kept pounding on Jim's chest. He was sweating.
Come on, wake up.
Jim did not wake up. His face was pale and cold.
Bob, I think he's dead.
After a while, Bob stopped.
Fuck.
I know. He seemed really sweet, and we killed him.
The thought made her shiver. She couldn't bear to look at the corpse.
We should go.
Yeah, nothing we can do.
Suddenly, Bob was in tears, and then he started again.
Bob, he's not gonna wake up. You have to stop. Bob!
Suddenly, Jim coughed up water in a high arc and jumped into the air. He landed on his back and coughed so hard that his whole body shook. There was a lot of water in him.
Yes!
She jumped into Bob's arms and kissed him on the cheek. Bob was crying too.
I told you I know he'd wake up.
Thank God you're so fucking stubborn.
I think he'll be alright now.
Yeah, I think so too, and we have to go.
Amy took the rifle from the ground. She looked at the hotel guests. Most were still there, gawking at the intruders from the sky.
Listen up, this man needs medical help. He's a good man. You, call him a chopper. The rest of you start calling your own rides to safety. This part of town is no longer safe. And you.
She pointed at the bartender, a small mustachioed man who looked like he might get wet himself.
I'd like a glass of water, please. And then a double shot of scotch.
I'll have the same in the opposite order, and food too. What are you serving?
Hamburger, sir, the bartender whispered while searching for empty glasses and staring at Amy's rifle.
Calm down, we're not gonna shoot you. Though, to be clear, we're not paying either.
The bartender nodded and began pouring drinks as fast as he could. He handed the glasses to them, hands still shaking. Would the miss also have a hamburger? He asked. Oh, hamburger.
Yes, please. I would love some steamed hams to go.
Wait a sec.
Bob glared at the bartender, who had suddenly gone very, very pale.
Those burgers. Can you make them vegetarian? Because we don't eat meat.
Amy burst into laughter. The bartender, who was much less amused, nodded frantically. Amy hadn't felt this good in a while. A single glass of water had somehow brought back all her strength, and with the scotch, she wasn't cold anymore either. Then she remembered what awaited them down in the streets.
We should get out of here before Jim manages to stand up and tries to arrest us.
You're right, the fight's still waiting for us, and this one's gonna be fucking savage.
Don't be so gloomy, you get to bash some heads.
They tipped the bartender generously, instructed him to serve a meal to Jim as soon as he was strong enough to stand, and left. Not knowing what else to do, they simply took an elevator to the lobby. They hadn't seen any guards yet.
Thanks for not giving up on Jim. I don't know what I would have done if I'd been the reason he died.
I did it because I could see that boy had a good heart. I hate to see good hearts stop too soon. Look, I want to apologize for earlier. I had no cause to yell at you. I was just...
Angry, tired, and in pain?
Yeah, something like that. By the way, I do think that other guy died, though.
I think so too. The people we left him with weren't the type to know how to stop bleeding or anything else useful.
Hey now, a lot of them looked real nice in there.
Suddenly, the entire building shook. They heard a low, muffled sound. Uh-oh.
Tanks?
Tanks?
Airstrikes?
Tanks for waiting.
That was an explosion.
An airstrike? That close? Things must be bad down there. We have to hurry. The music cut out and everything. Things must be really fucked.
Things are really fucked when the music stops. Josephine was coughing. She knew there would be tear gas. She'd been wearing a mask for God's sake, but then she'd been dumb enough to take it off to shout orders. Now she paid the price. They were lined up on the broad street that ran parallel to the tram line. She knew the protest had spread uncontrollably to other streets and parts of town. She had no idea how big her march had snowballed. The initial protest she'd hijacked had been a few thousand strong. Other groups had merged into it, and people had called their friends and family. More than a few businesses had tried to force their employees to stay at work despite the curfew and mortal danger. Some of these had marched as a group to join the riot instead. Students had showed up, as had illegal unions, and as far as she knew, most of the city's criminal gangs. All ages, genders, races, everyone needed water. And right now, most of them were hiding behind a wall of bulldozers, trucks, and excavators, including Josephine. Thank God for the construction crew and all their equipment. Some 200 meters ahead were enemy positions, and they were daunting. The security forces were arrayed behind walls of sandbags and mobile steel plates. And before even reaching that, there was a line of electric fencing. On the ramparts, the enemy had mounted machine guns, searchlights, and then some more machine guns. Trying to attack that position would be a suicide, and it seemed like there was no choice. Behind it, there was one more tram station, the one Josephine had used every day for years on her way to work. They took it they could bring their entire force to bear on the gardens. Some of the braver riders had snuck into nearby buildings looking for windows from which to shoot back. Others had led small groups out to the adjoining streets to search for weaker points. But Josephine knew in her heart that there was no weaker points, no way to sneak past and avoid casualties. Not this time. Why was Ronnie taking so long? Josephine could see something in the air around the gardens. Were those helicopters? If so, there were a lot of them. Drones were already buzzing above them, spraying more tear gas. Suddenly there were screams. A young boy had peeked over the truck he was hiding behind. He'd been shot instantly. A group of other eager would-be warriors opened fire, shooting mostly blind from behind cover.
Oh no.
She ducked just in time before a fearsome storm of fire began ripping the cars and machines apart. People screamed. Josephine could see an old woman collapse with her torso torn to pieces. The riders hunkered down, with many running to side alleys for cover. Others just ran away from the bullets and were then shot in the back. It didn't matter who fired first. Everywhere she looked, people were screaming, running, and dying. Someone fell down next to her, a middle-aged man who resembled Bob. Or so Josephine presumed. The man's face was gone. Her heart was pounding. She'd been here before, helpless as her followers were butchered. Breathing in as she braced her rifle and got up, she immediately sunk back down, bullets nearly giving her a new haircut. The security wasn't going to run out of ammo. They could keep that rate of fire up until their guns melted, and by then her people would be dead. She braced herself again, took a deep breath, and thought of Mr. Kendrick, Norbert, and all the others. She got up and took aim. She never fired. Instead, she watched in horror as the enemy barricade blew up into the air in a cloud of smoke and flame. The shockwave pushed her back and sent her rolling for a good distance, bruising her every limb. The blast had completely overwhelmed her hearing. The people around her were stunned and frozen. Grown men and women were shaking and gasping for breath. There was dust everywhere. Josephine tried to get up. It took a few attempts. Her legs wouldn't carry her and all the strength had gone out of her arms. When she finally stood up, she couldn't see much of the dust cloud. She scrambled to find her rifle. Kneeling to pick it up hurt so much that she felt like screaming. Around her, others were slowly rising up too. She saw two young boys huddling together on the ground. She knelt by them and tried to speak, but no one could hear anything. Instead, she smiled and helped them up. Little by little, leading by example, she was able to get many of those who hadn't run away back to the line. In turn, they brought back others, and those in the side alleys, been away from the blast zone, began to return. Josephine realized that everyone that had stayed either followed her around or stood still, waiting to see what she would do. No one but her understood what was going on. There was only one thing to do. She knew. Josephine gestured to those around her to follow her and climbed over the bulldozers. She felt exposed. Her rational brain told her that in the dust no one could see her, but every step was a struggle against fear. She couldn't be sure if anyone had actually followed her. She didn't look back. The dust cloud enveloped her. She was sure she screamed while running, but she couldn't hear it. She saw a light. At least one searchlight was still working. There was someone in the distance, a figure in the dust. Almost without stopping, Josephine fired. The figure toppled over and didn't get up. She approached it slowly. It turned out to be a young man with a pale, expressionless face. He'd died instantly. The man didn't have a gun on him, but he was wearing a uniform. Josephine heard shots around her and ducked. Her hearing was returning. Her people had followed her and were now shooting in the direction the enemy used to be in. Bullets whizzed by as Josephine picked up her pace. Someone was still shooting back from the barricade. Pieces of streetcars and charred people were everywhere. Josephine shrieked as she stepped on a corpse by accident. A young woman burned and twisted into an impossible position. Her fault. She heard shouts, more gunshots, and then silence. By the time she reached the barricade, the dust was clearing and the fight was over. Around her was a landscape from hell. There were corpses everywhere, amid burning cars and melted steel plates. The ground was covered in glass shards from the windows above. They reflected the flames, causing the ground itself to flicker in bright colors. There were rioters around her, shooting wounded and dying guards. They were from Ronnie's group. Some of them had formed a circle around the massive crater in the ground, waving flashlights to keep people from running into it. Josephine took a peek into the hole. There were more bodies at the bottom. This had been her idea. She had done this. They'd used the subway first to transport Ronnie's people behind the enemy line. Then they'd blown up a train full of demolition charges underneath the barricade. Their construction workers had brought and set them up. But Josephine could see that they were horrified by what they'd done. It was the only way, she told herself. She found Ronnie standing on the other side of the hole, staring down with tears in her eyes. Remind me. Didn't you promise me that we wouldn't do stuff like this anymore?
I did.
I'm so sorry. If there had been any other way...
Don't.
What?
We don't have time to wallow in guilt. It's done. We won. Now we have to live with it.
It's not over yet. All we've done is make an entrance. Now we have to get everyone through.
That shouldn't be too difficult. Now that the shooting stopped, everyone should be feeling brave again.
How was it on your end?
There were some guards at the subway station. Not many. We swarmed them in a few minutes. I think we lost a dozen or so fighters.
We lost many more. I'm astonished everyone didn't run away the second those machine guns opened fire.
That's a good sign. Maybe they finally had enough.
General Janice! A young woman approached Ronnie. What are your orders?
To stop calling me that. Secure the final tram station and start spreading the word that the Gardens Plaza has now been breached. Tell everyone to join the party. The woman nodded and ran away.
I see you've been promoted.
If I'm a general, what does that make you, President?
Okay, I'll stop. We should get moving. Wouldn't want to keep Francis waiting.
Josephine took off towards the plaza. Ronnie took one last look at the crater they'd made and shuddered. I wonder what Francis would say about this. Jesus! God, this game just doesn't stop.
Yeah?
The window panels shook as the blast reached the gardens. Like in a good way. Never mind. Francis was in his office watching the chaos unfold below. In the plaza, the police and what remained of security forces were regrouping and forming up. Even from his high vantage point, he could see that the men were scared. Why wouldn't they be? This was supposed to be an easy fight. Starving beggars weren't supposed to blow up the street beneath them. The explosion was on film. It would make for good PR once the fight was done. The last in a series of brazen acts of terror. Helicopters were arriving at the hotel opposite the gardens. So be it. The cowards wanted to run, he wouldn't stop them. Lace may have had a train full of explosive, but she couldn't have two. And she'd blown up their best avenue of retreat. Francis still had his tanks and airstrikes waiting for the riot to move into the open plaza. Josephine Lace had been a good terrorist. Would she make a good general? He smiled. The answer was irrelevant. She could be the best general in the history of the world, and it wouldn't make a difference. Her motley mass of rioters would burn all the same.
Is it ready?
The old woman behind him nodded.
Almost. There's a lot of background noise in the recording. I'm removing it now.
Francis looked at the hotel. He was slightly angry at himself for not seeing through Miss Sierra's act. He'd underestimated her just like he'd underestimated Lace earlier, an embarrassing repetition of failure. People who ended up where he had should be too good to make the same mistake twice. Fortunately, people like him had a plan B. With Lace in charge, something as trivial as a riot became threatening enough to cause the cream of Uptown to flee in panic. Soon the full force of that riot would be thrown against the disorganized police and the less than 100 armed guards at the gardens. At least as long as she remained in charge. The first wave of fleeing helicopters was disappearing in the darkness. Francis clenched his fist in anger. Those scared morons were supposed to be the leaders of society. Innovators, decision-makers, patrons, leaders. One whiff of danger and they'd fled like hens from a fox. He turned away. In the end, it didn't matter. Tomorrow the city would be saved. His plan implemented, and his mortal game with Miss Lace concluded. And he would make some changes to the boards of all major corporations. His inner circle had no place for cowards. In 10 years' time, the horrors of this night would be a distant memory. In this city, his city, would be the marvel of the world.
It's ready, sir, said the old woman.
Thank you, Sylvia. Now you'd be wise to seek shelter before the fighting begins again. There's a helicopter on the roof waiting. I'm sure the other secretaries are eager to get away.
Aren't you coming, sir?
Sylvia asked, slightly confused. Francis shook his head.
I have a rather important date coming up. Some things are worth more than money.
He heard the woman leave. Down on the plaza, riders began to clash with the still shaken police.
Smash that like, comment and subscribe.